The Battle of Geonosis had ended mere hours ago. The newly christened Grand Army of the Republic had secured victory against the separatist droids, but at terrible cost. Jedi lay dead across the arena sands, their lightsabers extinguished forever. Clone troopers, fresh from their Kaminoan birthing chambers, had experienced their first taste of war and found it bitter. And in orbit above the rust-colored planet, the first salvos of what would become the Clone Wars had been fired, ship against ship, Republic against Separatist. In the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, thousands of light-years away, the Council convened an emergency session. Masters who had fought on Geonosis reported their findings through holographic transmission. A Sith Lord named Count Dooku led the Separatists. The clone army's existence had been orchestrated by someone using a dead Jedi's identity, and the Republic now stood on the brink of galactic civil war. The questions far outnumbered the answers, and the shadows seemed to grow longer with each passing moment. "Begun, the Clone War has," Yoda intoned gravely, his ears drooping with the weight of foresight that pressed upon his ancient consciousness. "Dark times ahead, I sense. Shrouded, the future is. Clouded by the dark side." Mace Windu nodded, his expression troubled in a way that few had seen from the typically composed master. "We've committed the Jedi Order to a war we don't fully understand. Someone has been manipulating events for years, perhaps decades. The question is, who benefits from the Republic and Separatists destroying each other?" Before anyone could answer, before speculation could turn to investigation, the temple itself shuddered. Not from physical impact, not from any explosion or assault, but from something far more profound, a disturbance in the Force so massive, so overwhelming, that every Jedi in the building felt it simultaneously. Younglings cried out in the training halls. Padawans stumbled in the corridors. Even the masters gasped, their concentration shattered by what felt like a sun suddenly being born in the heart of Coruscant, its radiance drowning out all other light in the Force. What in the name of Ki Adi Mundi began, his usually logical mind struggling to process what his Force senses were telling him. His words were cut off as alarms blared throughout the temple. Security systems that had remained silent for centuries suddenly activated, warning of an unprecedented energy signature in the Senate district. The tactical displays showed readings that made no sense, power levels that exceeded anything in the Republic's databases, concentrated in a single point less than a kilometer from the Senate building itself. The Jedi Council mobilized immediately. Within minutes, Masters Yoda, Mace Windu, Ki Adi Mundi, and Plo Koon were aboard a speeder, racing through Coruscant's endless traffic toward the source of the disturbance. Temple guards followed in additional transports, their lightsaber pikes at the ready, though what good such weapons would be against a Force presence of this magnitude remained unclear. By the time they arrived at the plaza near the Senate building, they found thousands of civilians already gathered. But these were not curious onlookers or panicked refugees, they were supplicants. Beings of every species known to the Republic had fallen to their knees, faces turned toward a single figure standing in the center of the plaza. Humans, Twi'leks, Rodians, even a few Wookiees, all knelt in attitudes of worship or submission, their eyes wide with awe and terror in equal measure. The figure they knelt before was unlike anything the Jedi had ever witnessed. He stood easily 9 feet tall, a giant among beings, his physique perfect in proportions that spoke of both tremendous strength and impossible grace. He was clad in armor that seemed to be crafted from solidified golden light itself, not merely gold-colored metal, but material that appeared to be pure radiance given form and substance. The armor covered him from neck to feet, articulated with a precision that suggested technology far beyond anything the Republic had achieved, yet also possessing an aesthetic beauty that transcended mere functionality. But it was his face that truly captured attention and held it with irresistible force. It was perfection incarnate, ageless features that could have been 30 or 3,000 years old, neither masculine beauty nor raw power, but something that encompassed both. His eyes blazed with golden light that seemed to pierce through flesh and bone to examine the very soul. When that gaze swept across the assembled crowd, beings wept openly. Some from joy, others from the sudden, terrifying understanding of their own insignificance before such majesty. Power radiated from him in waves that were almost physical, pressing against the Force-sensitive Jedi like the pressure of ocean depths against a submersible. This was not merely strong in the Force, this was something that made even the strongest Jedi Masters feel like children standing before a star, aware that they were in the presence of something so far beyond their comprehension that comparison itself was meaningless. The God Emperor of mankind had arrived in the Star Wars galaxy. His transition had been different this time. Not a desperate escape through a dimensional tear while his mortal form failed upon the Golden Throne, not a cosmic accident that hurled him from one reality to another. This had been calculated. Deliberate, a choice made in that eternal moment between one failing heartbeat and the next. For 10,000 years, he had sat immobile upon the Golden Throne of Terra, his consciousness shattered across a million fragments, each fighting an eternal war within the immaterium to hold back the forces of chaos that would devour humanity whole. His physical form had withered to little more than a desiccated corpse, sustained only by the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers daily and the failing archaeotech mechanisms of the throne itself. He had endured because he must, because humanity needed him, because the alternative was extinction. But even the God Emperor's will had limits. The throne was failing. The mechanisms that sustained his physical form were breaking down one by one, their function a mystery even to the most learned tech priests of Mars. The Imperium he had built over 10 millennia was ossifying into the very religious tyranny he had sought to prevent, worshipping him as a god despite his own teachings against such superstition. And the forces of chaos grew stronger with each passing century, their influence spreading like cancer through the galaxy he had fought to protect. In that moment of realization that his Imperium might survive his death, or might fall into civil war that would consume humanity entirely, he had sensed something. A fluctuation in the warp, a momentary alignment of impossible circumstances, a tear in the fabric of reality that led somewhere else, somewhere far from the dying galaxy he had fought so long to preserve. A younger reality, less corrupted by chaos, but standing on its own precipice of darkness. The God Emperor of mankind had made a choice. He could remain on the Golden Throne, slowly degrading as the mechanisms failed and Terra fell, or he could reach through this breach and seek renewal in another reality. The Imperium would survive or fall on its own merits. He had given them 10 millennia of protection. Now, he would seek his own salvation, and perhaps, in another galaxy, build something better with the wisdom of his failures to guide him. The Emperor's full consciousness, which had been spread across the immaterium like a golden web holding back the darkness, pulled itself together with a force of will that made the warp itself scream. Every fragment, every shard of awareness that had been fighting its own individual battle against daemons and dark gods, consolidated into a single unified whole for the first time in 10,000 years. The power required was immense. The Golden Throne, already failing, gave its final service channeling that consolidated consciousness through the dimensional breach with one last surge of energy. The mechanisms exploded, the throne shattered, and the Emperor's withered physical form crumbled to dust. But his consciousness survived. It poured through the breach between realities like golden fire, carrying with it the accumulated knowledge and power of a being who had guided humanity for more than 40,000 years. And on the other side, in a plaza on Coruscant, that consciousness took form once again not as a withered corpse sustained by machinery, but as he had been during the Great Crusade, vital and powerful, the master of mankind reborn. The Emperor took his first breath in millennia that was not filtered through the mechanisms of the Golden Throne. He felt the air of Coruscant polluted by countless generations of industrial development but still breathable, still carrying the scent of life. He felt gravity press against his newly manifested form, felt the warmth of the sun on his golden armor, felt sensation return after 10,000 years of being little more than a consciousness trapped in a corpse. And immediately, he felt the difference in this realm. The warp was present here, but muted, filtered, localized. Where in his home reality, the immaterium was a roiling sea of emotion and thought that spanned the entire galaxy. Here it was more like a vast ocean, with humanity and other sentience creating ripples on its surface. The locals called it the Force, this primitive understanding of the warp's nature. They had divided it artificially into light and dark sides, imposing moral judgments on what was simply energy. Fascinating and deeply flawed. The Emperor reached out with his psychic senses, a casual effort that would have been impossible while his consciousness was scattered across the immaterium. He felt the vast sprawl of Coruscant around him, hundreds of billions of souls creating a background hum of consciousness like the buzz of insects. Among them, he sensed those who manipulated this force, some with discipline and training, others with raw instinct, still others with techniques that reeked of the dark side's corruption. And there, in the Senate building less than a kilometer away, he sensed something that made him pause. A void in the force, a carefully constructed shroud that hid something malevolent. Not chaos, this reality seemed blessedly free of the ruinous power's direct influence, but certainly dark side corruption of significant power and longevity. Someone practiced in the Sith arts, skilled enough to hide in plain sight from the very Jedi who claimed to guard against such threats. Interesting. This galaxy's guardians were blind to the very corruption they supposedly fought against. He would need to address that, but first, the approaching Jedi demanded his attention. The Emperor watched as the speeders descended, as 4 Jedi Masters and a contingent of temple guards approached through the crowd of kneeling civilians. He analyzed them with senses that had been studying humans and Xenos for 40 millennia. Their body language, their force signatures, their emotional states laid bare before his psychic scrutiny. The small green one in the lead was old, genuinely ancient by this galaxy's standards, perhaps 8 or 9 centuries, if his assessment was correct. More importantly, the being was wise, powerful in the Force, and carried the weight of responsibility with grace. This one had seen much, learned from his failures, and maintained humility despite his status. Rare qualities in any being, and worth respecting. The dark-skinned human beside him radiated focused discipline and absolute conviction. A warrior, despite his role as diplomat and counselor, this one had killed when necessary, and would do so again without hesitation, but also carried guilt for those necessities. Strong in the Force, yes, but constrained by rigid adherence to dogma that limited his true potential. The others were less impressive, competent Force users, certainly, but trapped even more completely by their order's self-imposed limitations. They saw the Force as something to be balanced, harmonized with, rather than a tool to be mastered and wielded. Such waste of potential. But there, behind the Masters, partially obscured by the temple guards, there was something that made the Emperor focus his full attention. A youth, barely out of his teenage years by physical appearance, with psychic potential that blazed like a beacon in the Force. Raw, untrained properly despite his years in the Jedi Order, emotionally volatile in ways that would have made him fail any proper psyker evaluation. But the sheer magnitude of power was extraordinary. Not Primarch level, even the Emperor could not create such beings without decades of genetic engineering and warp infusion. But approaching it, in this galaxy's terms, unprecedented. The boy had potential that exceeded any Jedi or Sith in recorded history, but that potential was being squandered by Jedi dogma that demanded he suppress the very emotions that could fuel his greatest strengths. The Emperor saw the boy's future laid out in possibility threads, the way he had once seen the futures of his Primarchs before chaos corrupted them. On his current path, the boy would fall to darkness, become a slave to a Sith master, slaughter the very Jedi who had trained him, and spend decades as a broken tool of tyranny before finding redemption only in death. Unacceptable. This one could be saved, could be forged into something far greater than either Jedi or Sith, could become what the Emperor had once hoped his Primarchs would be: transhuman warriors, immune to corruption, wielding all the power of the warp without being consumed by it. Yes, this one would serve his purposes well. "I am Grand Master Yoda of the Jedi Order," the small green being announced, stepping forward with more courage than he felt. His Geimer stick tapped against the plaza stones with a rhythm that suggested calculated calm rather than genuine ease. "Identify yourself. You must. Great power you possess. From where you come. No, we must." The Emperor regarded the ancient Jedi with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. When he spoke, his voice carried across the plaza without need for amplification, resonating in the minds of all who heard, not through volume but through psychic presence that made every word seem personally directed. "I am the God Emperor of mankind, Master of Terra, Lord of the Imperium of Man, he who sat upon the golden throne for 10,000 years holding back the darkness of the warp. I have come from a galaxy in its death throes, from a realm where humanity fights for survival against gods and demons, where every day is a battle against extinction itself. I have ruled over 1,000,000 worlds, commanded armies that could darken the skies of entire planets, and fought entities that would drive your strongest Jedi to madness with their mere presence. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the assembled Jedi, then continued, his tone becoming more immediate, more focused on the present rather than the past. And I find myself here, in your galaxy, at a moment of profound crisis. I arrive in a civilization that plays at politics while calling itself a republic, that maintains balance in the Force while darkness gathers unchecked, that trains warriors and calls them peacekeepers in a contradiction that weakens both roles. I perceive your failing democracy, your compromised leadership, your order's blindness to threats that hide in plain sight. And I offer you a choice. Accept my guidance and survive what is coming, or continue your current path and watch everything you have built crumble into darkness within a generation. Mace Windu stepped forward, his hand near his lightsaber hilt though he had not drawn the weapon. His expression carried both respect for the being's evident power and suspicion of anyone making such grandiose claims. We are the Jedi Order, guardians of peace and justice in the Galactic Republic for over 1,000 generations. We don't know who or what you are, stranger, but we don't take kindly to threats, no matter how powerful the being making them. I make no threats, Jedi. I state facts. The Emperor's gaze fixed on Mace with intensity that made the Master falter despite his considerable strength of will. Your republic is compromised at the highest levels by corruption, both political and mystical. A Sith Lord sits in a position of ultimate authority, manipulating both sides of your nascent war toward his own ascension to absolute power. Your order, blinded by its own dogma and the shroud your enemy has drawn over the Force, cannot sense him despite his proximity in the Senate itself. And beyond even this immediate crisis, beyond this petty war between Republic and Separatists, a greater threat approaches from outside your galaxy, an extragalactic invasion that will kill trillions if you remain unprepared when it arrives. Impossible, Ki-Adi-Mundi protested, his logical mind rejecting claims that contradicted everything the Jedi had observed. We would sense a Sith Lord in the Senate. We have been monitoring for exactly such threats since the Battle of Naboo revealed the Sith's return. We would. You sense nothing because you have forgotten how to truly look, the Emperor interrupted, his voice carrying disappointment rather than anger. You maintain your artificial balance while darkness gathers beneath your very noses. You train warriors with powers that could reshape reality itself, then cripple them with restrictions that ensure they can never reach their full potential. You speak of the Force as if it has sides, light and dark, good and evil, when in truth it is simply power, and only the wielder's purpose determines whether that power serves or destroys. The Emperor's eyes blazed with golden light that made several of the temple guards step back involuntarily. You have potential, Jedi. Your order preserves knowledge, maintains discipline, trains Force users in ways that prevent the casual emergence of madmen wielding powers they cannot control. These are valuable functions. But you have also become complacent, dogmatic, blind to your own failures. This ends now, whether you accept my assistance or not. I did not journey across the barriers between realities to watch another civilization fall to darkness through willful ignorance. Yoda's ears twitched, his ancient eyes studying the golden figure with unusual intensity. Unlike his younger colleagues, he did not immediately dismiss the Emperor's claims as impossible or threaten retaliation. Instead, he reached deep into the Force, extending his senses toward the Senate building with focused intensity that he rarely employed, pushing through the ever-present shroud that had troubled him for years. For just a moment, a brief instant, when his focus was absolute and the Force itself seemed to cooperate, the shroud parted. And Yoda felt it. A cold, oily presence that had always been there, but masked so carefully that they had mistaken it for nothing more than political ambition and personal darkness. The presence of someone steeped in the dark side, someone who had studied its techniques for decades if not longer, someone powerful enough to hide from the entire Jedi Council while sitting in the very heart of the Republic's government. Yoda's ears flattened against his head, his expression becoming deeply troubled. Troubled. I am, he admitted quietly, speaking more to himself than to the other Jedi. A darkness in the Senate. Sensed it I have, but attributed it to politics, to corruption of the mundane kind. If what this being says is true, a grave danger we face. Investigate this thoroughly. We must. Investigation will accomplish nothing at this point, the Emperor stated, his tone suggesting he had anticipated this response. Your Sith Lord Sheev Palpatine, who styles himself Darth Sidious, has been preparing for exactly such scrutiny for decades. He has contingencies for investigation, plans within plans, webs of deception so carefully constructed that conventional inquiry will only tangle you further in his manipulations. He will not be caught through normal channels, will not convict himself through evidence gathering, will not confess when confronted politely. The name landed like a thermal detonator in the midst of the Jedi. Chancellor Palpatine, respected statesman, moderate voice in a polarized Senate, friend to the Jedi Order who had supported them consistently through the political quagmire of the past decade, a Sith Lord. Several of the temple guards actually laughed, thinking this must be some test or twisted joke. Ki-Adi-Mundi's expression became deeply skeptical, his logical mind rejecting such a claim about a man who had been thoroughly investigated by multiple agencies. Even Mace Windu, who trusted his instincts about such matters, found the accusation difficult to credit. But Yoda did not dismiss it. He had felt the darkness in the Senate, and he remembered Qui-Gon's warnings before his death about the Sith's return being more significant than anyone realized. If there was even a possibility that the Chancellor was concealing such monstrous deception. Proof you have? Yoda asked, his tone carefully neutral. Or speculation only? I have certainty based on senses that pierce deeper than your foresight, the Emperor replied. I perceive not just power levels or emotional states, but the very essence of a being. Palpatine is Darth Sidious, has been for the entirety of his political career, and has orchestrated the current crisis to grant himself emergency powers that he will never relinquish. This is not speculation. This is observed fact. The Emperor's gaze swept across the assembled Jedi, then fixed on the young man he had identified earlier. But I have not come merely to expose one Sith Lord, significant though that threat may be. I have come because I sensed a far more critical situation, a convergence of possibilities where this galaxy stands at a crossroads. One path leads to darkness, tyranny, the slaughter of the Jedi Order, and eventual invasion by forces you are unprepared to fight. The other path leads to transformation, strength, unity against external threats, and the survival of your civilization. The difference between these paths hinges on a single individual. He pointed directly at Anakin Skywalker, who had been observing the entire exchange from behind the temple guards with growing confusion and apprehension. That one. The boy who burns so brightly in the Force that he blinds those around him to their own perceptions of possibility. Who is he? Obi-Wan Kenobi, who had been silent until now, immediately stepped protectively in front of his Padawan. His hand went to his lightsaber, not quite drawing the weapon but making his readiness to do so abundantly clear. This is Anakin Skywalker, my apprentice. He is a Jedi Padawan of great potential, yes, but he is under my instruction and the Council's authority. He is not your concern, stranger, no matter how powerful you may be. On the contrary, he is precisely my concern. The Emperor's voice took on a tone of absolute certainty that brooked no argument, the voice of someone who had commanded for millennia and expected obedience as the natural order of things. That boy possesses psychic potential beyond anything your order has seen in generations, perhaps in your entire recorded history. He is powerful, yes, but raw, undisciplined, controlled by his emotions rather than controlling them. He fears loss with an intensity that makes him vulnerable to manipulation. He loves with a passion that your order teaches him to suppress rather than channel properly. And on his current path, with your order's inadequate training, he will fall to darkness and become the greatest servant of the very Sith Lord I have warned you about. Anakin himself bristled at this public assessment, his face flushing with embarrassment and anger. I would never turn to the dark side, he protested, his voice carrying the absolute conviction of youth that has never truly been tested. I'm going to be the greatest Jedi ever. I'm going to be better than Master Yoda. Your arrogance proves my point, more eloquently than any argument I could make, the Emperor replied. And though his tone was stern, it was not unkind, more like a teacher correcting a student's fundamental misunderstanding. You have power without wisdom, strength without control, passion without purpose. The Jedi have done you a profound disservice by attempting to train you in their ways when you require something far different. You are no Jedi, young Skywalker, any more than a wolf is a domestic dog. You are something that could be so much more than either Jedi or Sith if properly forged, if given training that acknowledges your nature rather than trying to suppress it, if taught to channel your considerable gifts toward purpose rather than personal desire. Obi-Wan's hand closed fully around his lightsaber hilt, his protective instincts overriding his usual diplomatic nature. Anakin is my Padawan. He trains in the ways of the Jedi, learning control and discipline, not whatever dark path you would set him on. I will not allow you to corrupt him with promises of greater power. Dark. The Emperor's laughter was unexpected, carrying genuine amusement rather than mockery. The sound was deeply unsettling to the assembled Jedi, who had expected rage or threats in response to Obi-Wan's defiance. You understand so little, Jedi Knight. You have divided the Force into artificial categories, light and dark, good and evil, and in doing so have crippled your own effectiveness. There is no dark side and light side. There is only the Force, and how you choose to wield it. What purpose drives your use of power? He took a step forward, and despite the small movement, every Jedi felt the weight of his presence increase, as if gravity itself had intensified around the golden figure. I would teach the boy to use all aspects of his power without corruption, to channel rage without being consumed by it, to embrace his passions without being controlled by them, to love deeply without that love becoming the chains that bind him to darkness. I would forge him into what he should be, a Grey Knight, a warrior immune to corruption, capable of wielding powers that would destroy a normal Jedi while remaining absolutely incorruptible in his purpose. The term Grey Knight meant nothing to the Jedi. Such warriors did not exist in this galaxy, had never been conceived of by Force users who saw only binary choices. But the concept resonated at some deep level. A warrior who could use anger without hatred, power without corruption, strength without tyranny. It seemed impossible, contradictory to everything the Jedi taught about the dark side's seductive nature. Yet this being claimed to have created such warriors. And his evident power suggested that perhaps what the Jedi considered impossible was simply difficult. Mace Windu spoke carefully, his tactical mind analyzing the situation from multiple angles. You're asking us to simply hand over a Jedi Padawan to you? To let you train him in methods we know nothing about? Using techniques that sound dangerously close to dark side teachings? This is insane. The Council would never what? The Emperor interrupted, his voice sharp as a vibroblade. Would never consider an alternative to methods that are clearly failing? Would never acknowledge that your rigid dogma creates the very problems you claim to prevent? Tell me, Master Windu, how many Jedi have fallen to the dark side in your Order's history? Dozens? Hundreds? And how many of those falls began with the same suppression of emotion, the same denial of human nature that you currently impose on young Skywalker? The question struck uncomfortable truth. The Jedi taught that emotion led to the dark side, yet their own history was littered with fallen Jedi who had been consumed by suppressed emotions that eventually exploded. Attachment led to jealousy, led to hatred, led to suffering. The formula was true, but only because the Jedi refused to teach proper management of attachment in favor of demanding its complete absence. You know I speak truth, the Emperor continued, addressing the entire Council now rather than just Mace. You have created a system where Force-sensitive beings are taken from their families as children, taught to suppress every natural emotion, forbidden from forming the very bonds that give life meaning, and expected to somehow remain balanced and healthy. Is it any wonder so many fall when they finally encounter something they cannot help but care about? You have made attachment itself the enemy, when the true enemy is obsessive attachment without purpose beyond the self. Yoda closed his eyes, leaning heavily on his gimmer stick. The Emperor's words cut to criticisms the ancient master had himself contemplated during his long centuries of life. The Jedi way had evolved over millennia, yes, but had it evolved toward wisdom or merely toward self-preservation through emotional sterility? How many potential Jedi had been lost because the Order could not teach them to manage their passions rather than eliminate them? "A proposal, I would hear," Yoda said finally, opening his eyes to regard the Emperor with weary acknowledgement of uncomfortable truths. His tone made clear that several other council members were about to protest, but his raised hand forestalled their objections. "Train the boy your way you wish to. What do you offer in return? And how do we know your methods will not simply create a different kind of monster?" The Emperor nodded, pleased by the old Jedi's pragmatism. This one understood that principles were worthless if they led to extinction, that sometimes the lesser evil was accepting help from an uncomfortable source. Good. The galaxy would need such pragmatism in the trials ahead. "I offer you several things, Grandmaster. First, I will help you win your clone war swiftly and decisively, preventing the decades of conflict that would otherwise consume this galaxy. Second, I will expose Palpatine beyond any doubt, forcing him into the open where he can be dealt with rather than allowing him to continue his manipulations. Third, I will upgrade your clone army into a force capable of defending against threats you cannot yet imagine. Not merely competent soldiers, but transhuman warriors who can stand against anything this galaxy can produce." He paused, his golden eyes sweeping across the assembled Jedi to ensure they understood the magnitude of what he offered. "Fourth, I will share knowledge of the Yuuzhan Vong, the extragalactic invaders who will arrive in approximately a decade if allowed to proceed unchecked. I will provide technological and tactical intelligence that will allow you to prepare defenses against bioweapons and organic technology that would otherwise devastate your civilization. And fifth, I will demonstrate techniques of force manipulation that your Order has never conceived of, expanding your understanding of what is possible for those willing to move beyond artificial limitations. And in exchange," Mace pressed, knowing that such extensive offers must come with equally extensive prices. "In exchange, you allow me to train Anakin Skywalker in my methods, without interference from your Order beyond observation to ensure I keep my word about preventing his fall to darkness. You grant me a facility where I can conduct this training and the modifications necessary to enhance his physical form to transhuman standards. You provide access to your clone facilities on Kamino so I can implement improvements to the army, and you trust, or at least provisionally accept, my guidance regarding preparation for the threats ahead." "And if we refuse?" Mace asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The Emperor's expression became grave, tinged with regret for what he was about to describe. "Then I will do all of those things anyway, but Anakin Skywalker will fall to darkness exactly as I have foreseen. He will become Darth Vader, apprentice to Darth Sidious. He will lead an assault on this very temple, slaughtering Jedi by the dozen, including younglings who cannot defend themselves. He will hunt down the survivors across the galaxy, becoming Palpatine's enforcer for decades of Imperial tyranny. He will lose everything that makes him human, his body burned and broken, encased in a life support suit, his wife dead, his children hidden from him, his future a nightmare of service to a master he despises but cannot overthrow." The Emperor's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, yet every word carried perfect clarity. In the end, he will find redemption only in his final moments, sacrificing himself to save a son he never knew existed, dying with regrets so profound they poison even that final act of heroism. That is the future you guarantee if you refuse my help, Jedi. I have seen it. It is not prophecy or possibility, it is what will happen if current circumstances continue unchanged. I offer you a chance to avert that future. The choice is yours. The words settled over the plaza like a burial shroud. Even the civilians who had remained kneeling throughout the exchange felt the weight of the Emperor's pronouncement, the certainty that this was not threat or manipulation but simple statement of observed fact. Anakin felt ice in his stomach. The detailed vision Darth Vader, temple assault, burned body, lost wife was too specific to be mere manipulation. This being had somehow seen his potential future with the same clarity that some Jedi saw past events. And if that dark future was real, if it was truly what awaited him on his current path. "I need to speak with the council," Mace announced formally, recognizing that this decision was beyond what a few masters could authorize in the field. "We'll need to discuss this as a complete body before this." "No," Anakin's voice cut through Mace's words, surprising everyone, including Obi-Wan. The young Padawan stepped forward, moving past his master's protective stance to address the Emperor directly. His expression showed fear, yes, but also determination and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths that was rare in one so young. "If what you say is true," Anakin said slowly, choosing his words with unusual care, "if I'm really going to fall to the dark side and do all those terrible things on my current path, then I can't just wait while the council debates. Every day we wait is another day I might stumble, might make the wrong choice. You said you can train me to be incorruptible? To use my power without being consumed by it?" "I did," the Emperor confirmed. "And I can. But it will not be pleasant, young Skywalker. The process of transformation involves pain, physical, mental, and spiritual. You will be broken down to your essential components and rebuilt into something greater. Everything you think you know about yourself will be challenged. Every comfort will be stripped away. Only if you have the strength to endure and the wisdom to accept what you must become will you emerge as I promise." Anakin met those golden eyes without flinching. Something in the Emperor's words resonated with him at a level beyond conscious thought. The Jedi trained him to suppress his emotions, but he felt them constantly churning beneath his controlled surface. They taught him not to fear, but he was terrified of losing Padme. They taught him not to love, but he loved with a passion that consumed him. Perhaps this being was right. Perhaps the Jedi way wasn't wrong, but was simply wrong for him specifically. "I'll do it," Anakin declared, his voice steady despite his fear. "Train me your way. Make me strong enough that I never become this Darth Vader. I don't care how much it hurts. I don't care what I have to endure. I won't let that dark future come true." "Anakin, no," Obi-Wan protested, genuine fear evident in his voice. "You don't have to do this. We can help you, guide you through proper Jedi techniques. Don't throw away your training because some stranger claims to know your future." "He's not some stranger, Master," Anakin replied, turning to face Obi-Wan with unusual maturity. "He's something far beyond us. I can feel it in the Force. He's telling the truth about everything. About Palpatine, about the invasion, about me, and if there's even a chance that he's right about my future." He swallowed hard, his voice dropping. "I've had nightmares, Master. Dreams about killing Jedi, about standing over bodies, about darkness consuming everything I touch. I thought they were just bad dreams. But what if they were visions? What if the Emperor is right, and I'm going to fall if nothing changes?" Obi-Wan looked stricken, recognizing the fear that had been hidden beneath his Padawan's confident exterior. How had he missed signs of such profound anxiety? What kind of master had he been, that Anakin felt he couldn't share these nightmares? "The boy makes his choice," Yoda announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of wisdom and experience with difficult decisions. "Honor it, we should. If wrong we are, correct the course we can. If right the Emperor is, save Anakin we must, whatever the cost." "Master Yoda, you can't be serious," Ki-Adi-Mundi protested. "We're talking about handing over a Jedi to an unknown being who admits he'll use techniques that sound like dark side training." "Serious I am," Yoda replied firmly, his tone brooking no argument. "Felt the darkness in the Senate I have. Confirmed Anakin's nightmares are, if he speaks true. And sensed this being's power. We all have. Dangerous, yes. But more dangerous to ignore, I judge. Observe we shall. Intervene if necessary we will. But chance this we must take." The decision was made. Over the following hours, as word spread through the Jedi Temple and into the Senate, as politicians and military officials demanded explanations, as the holonet buzzed with speculation about the golden giant who had appeared in the plaza, the arrangements were finalized. The Emperor would be provided with a training facility outside Coruscant's main city proper, a location remote enough to prevent casual observation but close enough that the Jedi could respond if something went wrong. Anakin Skywalker would undergo training under the Emperor's direct supervision. Obi-Wan Kenobi would be allowed to observe when possible, maintaining some connection to ensure the process didn't corrupt his former Padawan. And in exchange, the Emperor would help the Republic navigate the crisis ahead and prepare for the threats only he could perceive. Palpatine learned of the arrangement through his extensive network of spies and informants embedded throughout the Jedi Temple and Senate. In the privacy of his chancellery chambers, far beneath the public levels where Darth Sidious could drop his carefully maintained disguise, the Sith Lord allowed his fury to manifest fully. The chamber shook with the force of his rage. Furniture cracked and splintered under invisible pressure. The windows, reinforced transparasteel designed to withstand orbital bombardment, developed spiderweb cracks as telekinetic force pressed against them. Sidious had not lost control of his emotions like this in decades, not since he had been an apprentice himself learning the ways of the dark side from his own master. This golden being was an unexpected variable, a disruption of plans that had been set in motion over the course of decades. The Clone Wars were supposed to drag on for years, generating the chaos and crisis that would justify emergency powers, that would allow Sidious to gradually transform the Republic into an empire with himself as Emperor. Dooku was supposed to play his role as separatist leader until the proper moment, then be disposed of in favor of a younger, stronger apprentice. That apprentice was supposed to be Anakin Skywalker. Everything had been arranged. The Council's distrust of the boy despite his power, Obi-Wan's inadequate training leaving Anakin emotionally vulnerable, the secret marriage to Padme, creating attachments that Sidious could exploit, the visions of her death that he would eventually plant to drive Anakin to desperation. It was elegant, sophisticated, a masterwork of manipulation that would deliver to Sidious the most powerful apprentice the Sith had ever known. And now this Emperor threatened to disrupt everything. But as Sidious's rage cooled, replaced by the calculating cunning that had kept him alive and undetected for so long, he began to see potential opportunities within the crisis. This Emperor claimed he would train Anakin in enhanced methods that used both light and dark without corruption. What if that training could itself be corrupted? What if Sidious could use the Emperor's own techniques to turn Anakin toward the dark side more effectively than the original plan? The boy would emerge from this training stronger, more powerful, with fewer of the emotional restraints that the Jedi normally imposed. If Sidious could claim him at the right moment, he would have a servant far more valuable than he had originally planned. The Emperor was providing him with a weapon even more finely crafted than Sidious could have managed alone. Yes, this could work. He simply needed to be patient, to watch for the opportunity, to strike at exactly the right moment when Anakin was powerful but still vulnerable. First, though, he needed to understand this Emperor better. What were his weaknesses? How could he be manipulated or eliminated if necessary? Sidious reached out through the Force, attempting to probe the golden being from a distance, to sense his emotions and intentions through techniques the Sith had perfected over millennia. It was subtle, barely detectable, the psychic equivalent of the lightest possible touch against the Emperor's consciousness. The backlash was instant, overwhelming, and absolutely terrifying. Sidious found himself suddenly face to face with a psychic projection of the Emperor in his own private chambers, despite all the dark side wards and protections he had layered over the location. The projection was not merely an image, it carried presence, authority, power that made even Sidious feel like a child caught stealing from his master. "Did you truly believe you could spy upon me undetected, Sidious?" the Emperor's projection asked, his voice carrying disappointment more than anger, which somehow made it more unsettling. "I have fought daemons of chaos who make your Sith powers seem like parlor tricks performed by street magicians. Your dark side is but a shadow of true chaotic corruption, your techniques primitive compared to the horrors I have faced across 40 millennia. You cannot hide from me. You cannot surprise me. You are known, Sith Lord, completely and absolutely known, and your time grows short with each day you continue your charade." Sidious recovered quickly, dropping his own disguise within the privacy of his chambers. Yellow Sith eyes blazed with dark side energy, his face contorted into the true appearance he hid beneath his Chancellor's mask. "You may know what I am, but you cannot touch me, not without proof. Not without revealing yourself to be the tyrant your actions suggest. We are both players in the great game, Emperor, let us see who plays it better. You mistake me for a player, the Emperor replied, his tone almost pitying. I am not playing games, Sidious. I am preventing extinctions. Your games, your ambitions, your 1,000-year plan for Sith revenge, all of it is meaningless noise against the genuine threats this galaxy will face. I tolerate your continued existence only because you serve a purpose. You will be the final test for young Skywalker, the crucible that proves whether my training has succeeded. When he defeats you, and he will defeat you, it will demonstrate that he has truly transcended your artificial light-dark dichotomy. Bold words. But if your training fails, if I corrupt the boy despite your efforts, then I will personally tear your spirit from your body and erase it so completely that the Force itself will forget you ever existed, the Emperor stated with absolute conviction. You will not be imprisoned to potentially escape, not given any chance at resurrection through your Sith techniques. You will simply cease to be, on every level of reality. That is your fate, Sidious. Whether you fall to Skywalker or to me, the only question is whether your death serves the greater purpose of proving his incorruptibility. The projection vanished, leaving Sidious alone in his cracked and damaged chambers. For the first time in decades, Darth Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith, master manipulator who had successfully deceived the entire Jedi Order, felt genuine fear. This Emperor was far more dangerous than he had anticipated. Plans would need to change, caution would need to be extreme, and the window for successfully manipulating Anakin Skywalker had just become much smaller. But Sidious had not survived this long by abandoning plans when they became difficult. He would adapt, adjust, find the weaknesses in the Emperor's approach. Everyone had weaknesses, even gods, especially gods. The training facility the Emperor had been provided was located on a remote plateau approximately 200 kilometers from Coruscant's main city proper, close enough for rapid transport, but far enough to be isolated from casual observation. It had originally been a Republic military research station, decommissioned years ago when budget cuts forced consolidation of facilities, but its infrastructure remained largely intact. Reinforced buildings designed to contain explosive experiments, power generators capable of supporting high-energy research, and most importantly, isolation from the billions of beings whose ambient force presence would have complicated the delicate work ahead. The Emperor had transformed the facility in less than a week, using techniques that left even the Jedi architects baffled. Walls had been reinforced not just with additional materials, but with inscriptions in languages no scholar could identify psychic wards, though the locals lacked the terminology to describe them properly. Equipment had been installed that seemed to blend technology with something beyond technology, mechanisms that pulsed with energy in ways that conventional sensors couldn't properly measure. And at the center of it all was a chamber that Obi-Wan Kenobi, witnessing it for the first time, could only describe as simultaneously a medical facility and a torture device. "You're going to put him in that?" Obi-Wan asked, unable to keep the horror from his voice as he looked at the apparatus dominating the central chamber. It resembled a medical bed but extended far beyond conventional healing technology. Dozens of articulated arms ending in various instruments, tubes containing liquids that glowed with faint luminescence, neural interface points that would connect directly to a patient's brainstem, and worst of all, restraints clearly designed to keep someone immobilized even if they fought with force-enhanced strength. "I am," the Emperor confirmed, his tone matter-of-fact about what he clearly considered a simple necessity. The transformation from normal human to transhuman requires extensive physical modification. Muscle tissue must be reinforced at the cellular level. Bone structure must be strengthened with compounds that increase density without reducing flexibility. Additional organs must be introduced to provide redundancy and enhanced function. The nervous system must be modified to handle increased information processing. All of this requires precision, at a level your galaxy's medical technology cannot achieve, but I can achieve it through direct manipulation of biological processes using what you call the Force. "It looks like an implement of torture," Obi-Wan stated bluntly. "It will feel like torture," the Emperor acknowledged without hesitation or apology. "The pain will be immense. There is no way to perform modifications of this magnitude without activating every pain receptor in the body repeatedly. Anesthesia would interfere with the force manipulation required to guide the changes. He must be conscious, aware, experiencing everything. This is barbaric. This is necessary. The Emperor turned to face Obi-Wan directly, his golden eyes carrying weight of experience beyond the Jedi's comprehension. I have performed this procedure thousands of times in my own galaxy, creating space marines from aspirants who understood the cost. Approximately 30% do not survive their bodies, reject the modifications, or their minds break under the strain. But those who do survive emerge as living weapons capable of fighting threats that would kill any normal human in seconds. Your Anakin must become such a warrior if he is to survive what I have seen in his future. Obi-Wan wanted to protest further, wanted to take Anakin and leave this place, return him to the temple where he would be safe if limited. But he had seen the determination in his former Padawan's eyes, had witnessed Anakin's absolute conviction that this was necessary. And more troubling, he had felt the truth in the Emperor's warnings about Anakin's potential future. The vision of Darth Vader, while horrifying, had resonated with prescient clarity that Obi-Wan couldn't dismiss as mere manipulation. So he simply nodded, accepting what he couldn't change, and prayed to the Force that this wasn't a catastrophic mistake. Anakin arrived an hour later, having said his goodbyes to Padme in private. The secret of their marriage remained secure. Even the Emperor, with all his powers, had given no indication of knowing about it. Anakin wondered about that briefly. Surely someone with psychic abilities that could pierce Palpatine's deceptions could sense his emotional attachment to Padme. Perhaps the Emperor knew but didn't care, recognizing that the attachment itself wasn't the problem, so long as it didn't become obsessive and self-destructive. "Are you ready?" the Emperor asked, as Anakin entered the central chamber and saw the apparatus for the first time. Anakin's steps faltered momentarily, his eyes widening at the complexity and evident purpose of what awaited him. He swallowed hard, fear and determination warring in his expression. Will this really make me strong enough that I won't fall to darkness? The physical modifications will make you a match for any opponent in this galaxy in pure combat capability, the Emperor replied precisely. But that is merely the foundation. True incorruptibility comes from purpose, from discipline, from a will forged through trials that would break lesser beings. The pain you are about to experience is the first test. If you cannot endure physical agony while maintaining your sense of self, then you will certainly fall when faced with the more subtle torments that Sidious will attempt to inflict. "I can handle pain," Anakin stated, with the confidence of youth that has never truly been tested by agony. "We shall see. Remove your clothing and lie down on the platform." Anakin did as instructed, trying not to think too hard about what was coming. He had been injured before the Tusken camp, various training accidents, the arena on Geonosis. He knew what pain felt like. This would just be more of the same, just longer. He could handle it. He was so very, very wrong. The moment the Emperor activated the apparatus and began the first phase of modifications, Anakin understood that nothing in his previous experience had prepared him for this. The pain wasn't just intense, it was absolute, all-consuming, operating on levels he hadn't known existed. His muscles were being systematically torn apart and rebuilt fiber by fiber. His bones were being infused with strengthening compounds that made them feel like they were being crushed and melted simultaneously. His organs were being modified, twisted, enhanced in ways that made his entire body scream in protest. And through it all, he had to remain conscious. Had to maintain control of his mind while his body was convinced it was dying. Had to prevent himself from retreating into the force-induced unconsciousness that would have provided escape from the agony. Obi-Wan, watching from outside the chamber, had to turn away repeatedly. The sounds Anakin made, screams that gradually degraded into animal howls of pure suffering, were almost unbearable to witness. Several times he nearly intervened, nearly demanded the Emperor stop before his former Padawan was destroyed. Only the knowledge that doing so would mean Anakin's eventual fall to darkness kept him from interfering. The process took 3 days for the first phase. 3 days during which Anakin knew nothing but pain, existing in a state where every second stretched into eternities of suffering. His throat became raw from screaming. His mind fractured and reformed repeatedly as it tried to process sensory input that exceeded its capacity to handle. But he endured. On the 3rd day, when the Emperor finally deactivated the apparatus and released him from the restraints, Anakin stumbled to his feet with muscles that responded differently than they had before. He was taller by several inches, the bone lengthening had added height to his frame. His body was visibly more muscular, though not grotesquely so. The Emperor had been careful to maintain human proportions rather than creating the massive builds of true space marines. "How do you feel?" the Emperor asked, though he already knew the answer from his psychic senses. "Like I died and came back wrong," Anakin replied hoarsely, his voice damaged from days of screaming. "Everything feels different. Stronger, yes, but also strange. Like I'm wearing someone else's body. That sensation will fade as you acclimate. Your nervous system is still adjusting to the enhanced muscle responses and improved sensory input. Within a week, this will feel natural. Within a month, you will have forgotten what it was like to be merely human." Anakin tested his new body carefully, making a fist and watching the muscles in his forearm ripple with power far beyond what they had contained before. When he gripped the edge of a durasteel table, the Emperor had provided one specifically for this test. His fingers bent the metal like it was soft clay. "I could crush someone's skull with my bare hands now," he observed, both awed and slightly disturbed by the realization. "Yes, you will need to learn control, to calibrate your strength so you don't accidentally destroy everything you touch. That is part of the training. But first, you must heal fully. The modifications are complete, but your body needs time to stabilize. Rest for 3 days. Eat constantly. Your enhanced metabolism will require approximately 5 times your previous caloric intake. Then we will begin the true training." Those 3 days were strange for Anakin. His body was constantly hungry, processing vast amounts of food as it finished adapting to the modifications. His senses were sharper than they had ever been. He could hear conversations from hundreds of meters away, could see details that would have been invisible before, could smell individual components in complex mixtures. The Force itself felt more present, more accessible, as if the modifications had somehow enhanced his connection to it. Obi-Wan visited daily, bringing food from Coruscant and checking on his former Padawan's condition. The conversations were awkward at first, Obi-Wan unsure how to relate to this transformed version of Anakin, Anakin trying to articulate experiences beyond his vocabulary to describe. But gradually, they found their rhythm again, master and student reconnecting through shared history, even as they acknowledged that their relationship had fundamentally changed. "You're not my Padawan anymore," Obi-Wan finally acknowledged on the 3rd day. "Not really. You're something else now. Something the Emperor is creating. I should be jealous, or angry, or trying to take you back to the temple. But instead, I just find myself hoping this works, that you really do become strong enough to avoid that dark future." "I won't become Darth Vader," Anakin promised, his enhanced voice carrying conviction. "Whatever it takes, whoever I have to become, I won't let that future happen. I swear it, Master." When the 3 days ended and Anakin's body had fully stabilized, the Emperor began the 2nd phase, psychic discipline and Force manipulation training. This phase was different from the physical modifications, less overtly painful, but in some ways more challenging, because it required Anakin to confront and modify his own mental structures rather than simply enduring external changes. "The Jedi teach you to suppress emotion," the Emperor began, his teaching style direct and uncompromising. "They claim that emotion leads to the dark side, that peace requires the absence of passion. This is profoundly wrong. Emotion is not the enemy. Uncontrolled emotion, emotion that drives your actions rather than being driven by your purpose, that is the danger." He demonstrated by channeling Force energy in ways that made Anakin's previous training seem like a child's first attempts at walking. The Emperor showed how anger could be channeled into focused power without becoming hatred, how fear could sharpen awareness without paralyzing, how passion could fuel strength without consuming control. "Watch," the Emperor commanded, raising one hand. Force energy coalesced around his palm, but not the simple telekinesis Anakin was familiar with. This was Force lightning, the iconic dark side power that every Jedi was taught to fear as a sign of corruption. But the lightning the Emperor generated was wrong, or rather, different. Instead of the blue-white crackling energy of Sith lightning, this was golden, blazing with light that somehow didn't blind despite its intensity. "This is Force judgment," the Emperor explained as the golden lightning danced between his fingers. "It is powered by righteous fury, by anger at injustice and corruption, but directed by absolute purpose rather than personal hatred. It destroys the wicked while leaving the innocent unharmed. It burns away dark-side corruption at the spiritual level. And it requires you to feel anger genuine, powerful anger, while maintaining complete control over that emotion and directing it toward justice rather than vengeance. But the Jedi say many things that limit your potential," the Emperor interrupted. "They are not entirely wrong. Anger without purpose does lead to the dark side. But anger in service to justice, controlled by discipline, channeled through purpose, that is simply power. The dark side is not emotion itself, but emotion without purpose beyond the self. Power wielded for personal gain rather than greater good." Anakin listened, his enhanced mind processing this radically different perspective on Force use. It made sense in ways that Jedi teaching never quite had. He had always struggled with the demand to feel nothing, to maintain perfect serenity regardless of circumstance. But this feeling fully, while acting purposefully, resonated with his nature. "Show me how," he requested. The training that followed was intensive beyond anything the Jedi Temple provided. The Emperor pushed Anakin to his physical and mental limits repeatedly, forcing him to call upon emotions the Jedi would forbid while maintaining absolute control over those emotions. They trained in combat, the Emperor demonstrating fighting styles that incorporated Force powers in ways Anakin had never imagined. They trained in psychic defense, building mental fortifications that would resist manipulation and corruption. They trained in Force manipulation, learning techniques that drew on both light and dark aspects without falling to either extreme. And through it all, the Emperor taught purpose. "You ask what you are fighting for," he said during one session when Anakin questioned the point of a particularly brutal training exercise. "The Jedi would tell you to fight for peace, for balance, for abstract ideals. These are insufficient anchors when faced with true temptation. You must serve something concrete, something that justifies any sacrifice." "What did you fight for?" Anakin asked, genuinely curious about this being who claimed to have ruled for 40 millennia. "Humanity's survival," the Emperor replied without hesitation. "In my galaxy, humanity was beset on all sides by threats that sought our extinction. Alien empires that viewed us as inferior, demonic entities that fed on our suffering, our own divisions that would have destroyed us through internal conflict. I fought to ensure that humanity, flawed, chaotic, beautiful humanity, would endure regardless of the cost. That purpose sustained me through horrors you cannot imagine, through decisions that haunt me still, through actions that by any moral standard would be considered monstrous. But humanity survived because I was willing to do what was necessary. And what's my purpose supposed to be?" "That is for you to determine," the Emperor said. "But I suggest this. Fight to protect those you love and to defend humanity from extinction-level threats. Your love for Padme, yes. I know about your secret marriage is not weakness if you channel it correctly. Love her fiercely, but let that love expand outward to encompass all those who depend on you. Fight not to prevent her death specifically, but to create a galaxy where those you love can thrive. Let personal motivation fuel greater purpose." Anakin absorbed this, feeling pieces of his fragmented worldview clicking into place. The Jedi had told him his marriage was forbidden, that attachment was dangerous. The Emperor acknowledged the attachment but redirected its energy towards something larger. It was the difference between being controlled by love and using love as fuel for purpose. "I understand," he said slowly. "Or at least, I'm beginning to. Understanding comes with time and testing. For now, simply practice. Learn to feel anger without hatred, fear without paralysis, love without obsession. These are the foundations of being a Grey Knight, emotions fully experienced but purposefully directed." Months passed. The training intensified. Anakin learned to generate Force judgment, though his golden lightning was initially weak and flickering compared to the Emperor's. He learned combat techniques that incorporated both Jedi forms and completely new styles the Emperor taught him. He learned to resist psychic manipulation through mental disciplines that turned attempted corruption back upon the attacker. And most importantly, He learned to know himself, his strengths, his weaknesses, his triggers, his vulnerabilities. The Emperor forced him to confront every fear, every insecurity, every dark impulse, not to suppress them as the Jedi taught, but to acknowledge them, understand them, and master them through sheer force of will backed by absolute purpose. The Emperor also crafted armor for him during this time. Not the heavy, full-encasing armor of a space marine, but something more elegant while still providing significant protection. Silver rather than gold, the Emperor reserving his own golden aesthetic, the armor was inscribed with psychic wards and symbols that would enhance Anakin's force abilities. It was beautiful and terrible at once, marking him as something other than Jedi or Sith. "When you wear this," the Emperor explained as he presented the completed armor, "you announce yourself as different. As a warrior who serves neither the Jedi's limiting dogma nor the Sith's self-destructive corruption. You are the first Grey Knight of this galaxy, Anakin Skywalker. Carry that responsibility with the gravity it deserves." Anakin donned the armor for the first time and felt its weight settle on him, not just physical weight, though the armor was substantial, but the weight of expectation and purpose. He looked at himself in a reflective surface and barely recognized the figure staring back, taller, more muscular, clad in silver armor that seemed to glow faintly with inner light, his entire bearing radiating controlled power. "I barely remember who I was before this," he admitted quietly. "That person is not gone," the Emperor assured him. "He is simply forged into something greater. The Anakin Skywalker who loved Padme still exists. The Anakin who wanted to free slaves and protect the innocent remains. But now you have the power to actually achieve those goals, rather than simply hoping and failing. Use that power wisely." Meanwhile, the Clone Wars continued without Anakin's direct participation. The Emperor had been true to his word about helping end the conflict swiftly. He had visited Kamino and implemented modifications to the clone production process that horrified the Kaminoans but dramatically improved the resulting soldiers. The behavioral inhibitor chips were removed, the accelerated aging was corrected, and physical enhancements were added that made the clones superior to normal humans, even if not fully transhuman. Clone commanders like Rex, Cody, and Wolf received even more extensive modifications, proto-space marine transformations that gave them capabilities approaching Anakin's own enhanced physiology. They emerged from the process as leaders who could inspire through example, warriors who could face any conventional threat. "You are not property," the Emperor had told them during their transformation, words that echoed his statement in another galaxy. "You were created as living weapons, yes, but you are also sentient beings with worth beyond your military function. You will serve not because you were programmed to, but because you choose to defend humanity against those who would destroy or enslave it. That choice, that purpose, makes you warriors rather than mere soldiers." The clones had responded to this message with fierce loyalty. For beings who had been created as property, being acknowledged as people with intrinsic value was revolutionary. They would have died for the Republic before. Now they would die for the Emperor and the purpose he represented. Within 6 months of the Emperor's arrival, the Clone Wars had shifted dramatically. The upgraded clones fought with effectiveness that exceeded even the Separatists' most pessimistic estimates. Jedi leading these forces found their troops actually taking initiative, thinking tactically, surviving battles that should have been massacres. The war was not over, but the Republic's position had strengthened significantly. And throughout all of this, Palpatine watched and schemed. He had attempted several subtle manipulations of Anakin during the training period, visions sent through the Force, whispers in dreams, suggestions planted in moments of vulnerability. But each attempt either failed to penetrate Anakin's enhanced mental defenses or was immediately reported to the Emperor, who would then spend hours training Anakin to resist that specific technique. Sidious was running out of options. The window for corrupting Anakin was closing rapidly. Soon the boy would emerge from training fully transformed, and then Sidious forced himself to acknowledge there might be no opportunity at all. Drastic measures would be necessary. Palpatine would need to engineer a crisis so severe that even the Emperor's training couldn't fully protect Anakin from temptation. Something that targeted the boy's deepest fear in a way that demanded immediate action rather than careful consideration. The Sith Lord began to formulate his most desperate gambit yet. But first, There was another matter to address. Count Dooku had been growing suspicious about his master's plans. The Confederate leader had noticed that the Emperor's interventions were systematically undermining the Separatist cause, yet Sidious was doing nothing to counter them. When Dooku had attempted to attack Republic clone facilities directly, Sidious had ordered him to stand down, claiming the timing wasn't right. Dooku was beginning to suspect that Sidious was preparing to dispose of him, to replace him with a new apprentice once the war ended. The old Count was correct. Of course, that had always been the plan. But now Dooku's suspicions made him a liability that needed to be addressed immediately, before he did something foolish like revealing Sidious's identity in a desperate attempt to secure his own position. Palpatine sent the coded message. "Come to Coruscant. We must discuss the war's progress. I have a new task for you, one that requires your particular skills." Dooku arrived warily, his instincts warning him that this meeting might be a trap. But he came anyway, bound by Sith tradition and his own pride. He would not flee like a coward from his own master. The meeting was scheduled in a location Palpatine rarely used, an abandoned industrial facility in Coruscant's lower levels, far from the Senate's gleaming towers. When Dooku arrived, he found not just his master, but also the Emperor's facility in the distance, and realized too late what was about to happen. This was not a meeting. This was an opportunity for Palpatine to eliminate a loose end while simultaneously field-testing the Emperor's new warrior. "Anakin Skywalker," Palpatine announced through a holographic transmission, addressing both Dooku and the Emperor's facility simultaneously. "I know you train there, preparing to face the Sith. I offer you your first real test. Count Dooku is here, exposed and vulnerable. Come face the Separatist leader. Prove your training has value, or hide in your sanctuary while a Sith Lord operates freely in your city." It was clever, Sidious had to admit to himself. Either Anakin would refuse, demonstrating that the training had made him cautious to the point of ineffectiveness, or he would accept and potentially be killed by Dooku, removing him as a future threat to Sidious's plans. And if by some chance Anakin won, then Dooku was eliminated without Sidious having to dirty his own hands. Win-win. From the Sith Lord's perspective, the Emperor, receiving the message in his facility, smiled grimly. This was premature. Anakin had perhaps another 2 months of training before he would have considered him ready for real combat. But sometimes circumstances forced adaptation. And Dooku, while formidable, was not Sidious himself. This would be an adequate test of Anakin's progress. "Palpatine offers you Count Dooku," the Emperor told Anakin, who had been practicing Force techniques in the training chamber. "He attempts to manipulate events, to force a confrontation before you are fully ready. You may refuse if you judge yourself unprepared. There is no shame in acknowledging limitations." Anakin considered for only a moment. "I'm ready, or at least ready enough. And if we let Dooku slip away, when will we have another chance?" "True. Very well. But understand, this will be a real battle, not a training exercise. Dooku will attempt to kill you. You must be prepared to kill him in turn, not with anger or hatred, but with purpose. Can you do that?" "Yes," Anakin replied, with the certainty that came from months of intensive training. "I know what needs to be done. Then go. And remember everything I have taught you." Anakin departed in the custom speeder the Emperor had provided, racing toward the coordinates where Dooku waited. He wore his silver armor, carried his modified lightsaber, and moved with the confidence of someone who had been broken down and rebuilt into something far beyond his original self. Obi-Wan, who had been observing from the facility, contacted the Jedi Temple immediately. "Anakin is heading into a confrontation with Count Dooku. We need backup, council support." "No," the Emperor's voice cut through the transmission. "This is his test. He faces it alone or not at all. Your council may observe, may stand ready to intervene if he falls, but they will not interfere unless absolutely necessary. This is how warriors are forged, Master Kenobi, through trials that force them to apply their training under genuine threat of death." Obi-Wan wanted to protest, but he knew the Emperor was right. Anakin had trained for this. He was no longer the impulsive Padawan who had faced Dooku on Geonosis and lost his arm. He was something else now, Time to see if that transformation had been successful. Count Dooku waited in the abandoned facility with growing apprehension. He had expected his master to meet him personally, perhaps to deliver new orders or more likely to attack him in an attempt to eliminate a perceived threat. Instead, he was being used as bait for Skywalker, the young Jedi who had become the subject of so many rumors over the past months. Dooku had heard the reports. Anakin had withdrawn from active service, was undergoing specialized training with the mysterious golden being who had disrupted the Sith's plans. Some claimed the boy was being corrupted to the dark side. Others insisted he was becoming more purely aligned with the light than any Jedi in generations. Still others whispered that he was being transformed into something entirely different, neither Jedi nor Sith. The truth would reveal itself shortly. Dooku sensed the approach, a presence in the Force that was both familiar and utterly foreign. Yes, this was Anakin Skywalker, but changed almost beyond recognition. The raw, undisciplined power was still there, but now refined, focused, channeled with precision that suggested intensive training. And the emotional signature was strange: controlled passion, purposeful anger, fear acknowledged, but not indulged. It was like nothing Dooku had encountered in 8 decades of studying the Force. Anakin entered the facility through the main entrance, not attempting stealth or surprise. He walked calmly, his silver armor catching what little light penetrated the abandoned structure. And when he saw Dooku waiting for him, he simply ignited his lightsaber. The blade was silver white, humming with a frequency that made Dooku's dark side-attuned instincts scream danger. This was not a normal lightsaber, had been modified or crafted with techniques Dooku didn't recognize. Anakin Skywalker, Dooku greeted, drawing his own crimson blade with the elegant flourish of a Makashi master. I hear you found a new teacher. Has he taught you any actual skill, or merely tricks and enhancements? He taught me purpose, Anakin replied, his voice deeper than Dooku remembered, enhanced by the physical modifications. Something you abandoned when you fell to the dark side, Count. You serve Sidious because he promised you power. I serve the Emperor because he showed me how to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That's the difference between us. Pretty words. Let us see if you can back them with action. They fought. Within seconds, Dooku realized he was in serious trouble. The boy moved with speed that shouldn't be possible, his enhanced physiology letting him strike and dodge with timing that exceeded even Force Precognition's ability to counter. The Form 2 Makashi that had served Dooku so well for decades, refined, elegant, perfect for lightsaber dueling, was inadequate against an opponent who combined multiple forms fluidly while adding techniques that seemed to come from nowhere. Anakin fought with a hybrid style that incorporated Shicho's raw power, Soresu's defensive perfection, Ataru's acrobatic speed, and elements Dooku didn't recognize at all. His strikes came from impossible angles. His defense left no openings, and his strength, enhanced by both his physical modifications and force augmentation, drove Dooku backward step by step. Dooku attempted to create distance, to use the Force to throw debris and unbalance his opponent. Anakin simply deflected the objects with casual gestures, not even slowing his advance. You rely too much on technique, Anakin observed as their blades locked briefly. The Emperor taught me that technique without purpose is just choreography. Everything I do serves a goal. Every strike has intention. You're just following forms you memorized decades ago. Dooku snarled and disengaged, recognizing that this approach was failing. Very well. If conventional dueling couldn't win this, perhaps Force powers would. He channeled Force lightning, blue-white energy arcing toward Anakin with enough power to kill a rancor. The young warrior raised his hand, and the lightning was absorbed harmlessly, drawn into his being and dissipated. Then Anakin responded with his own lightning golden, blazing, carrying a weight that made Dooku stumble backward in shock. Force judgment struck Dooku squarely, and the Count screamed. This was not the sadistic pleasure-pain of Sith lightning that fed on fear and suffering. This was purifying fire that burned at his very essence, attacking his connection to the dark side itself. Every action he had taken in service to the dark side, every manipulation, every betrayal, every murder, was laid bare and judged, and the judgment was absolute condemnation. You feel it, Anakin stated calmly, advancing as Dooku fell to his knees. The difference between using the Force and being used by it. You let darkness consume you for power's sake, abandoned your Jedi principles for the promise of strength. I use all aspects of the Force in service to something greater. That's why I'm stronger. Dooku tried to respond, to mount a counterattack, but his power was gone, burned away by Force judgment that specifically targeted corruption. His lightsaber clattered from nerveless fingers. He knelt before Anakin, defeated so completely that resistance was impossible. For a moment, Anakin remembered the Jedi teachings about mercy, about taking prisoners, about not executing defeated opponents. Then he remembered the Emperor's lessons about necessary action, about purpose overriding comfort, about doing what was required regardless of personal feelings. "You've killed thousands through your leadership of the Separatists," Anakin said, his voice carrying neither anger nor satisfaction, just acknowledgement of facts. "You serve a Sith Lord who would enslave the galaxy. Mercy to you would be cruelty to your future victims. I don't do this because I hate you, Count. I do it because it's necessary." The silver blade descended. Count Dooku's head rolled from his shoulders. Anakin stood over the body, waiting to feel something: guilt, satisfaction, regret. Instead, he felt only calm certainty that he had done what was required. The execution had been cold, calculated, utterly unlike the passionate, angry strike that would have characterized his previous self. The Emperor had been right. He had changed fundamentally. Whether that change was for better or worse remained to be seen, but he could no longer deny that he was not the person he had been a year ago. Obi-Wan arrived minutes later with a Jedi response team, finding Anakin waiting calmly beside Dooku's corpse. "Anakin, you killed him." "Yes," Anakin confirmed simply. "He was too dangerous to imprison, too committed to the Sith to redeem. His death serves the greater good." "I know the Jedi teach differently, Master. But the Emperor's right, sometimes execution, is the only moral option when dealing with beings who will continue causing harm if allowed to live. That's a dark path, Anakin." "No, Master. It's just a path. Light and dark are judgments we impose on actions. What matters is purpose. I killed Dooku to protect future victims, not because I enjoyed it or was consumed by hatred. That's the difference the Emperor taught me." Obi-Wan looked at his former Padawan, this transformed warrior, who spoke with such cold certainty about moral necessities, and realized that the boy he had trained was truly gone. Someone else stood in his place, someone who might become the galaxy's greatest defender or its most terrible threat. Only time would tell which. News of Dooku's death spread rapidly. The Separatist leadership fragmented without his unifying presence. Some worlds sued for peace immediately. Others fought on under General Grievous's command, but without Dooku's Force-enhanced strategic planning, they were far less effective. The Clone Wars were entering their endgame, much faster than anyone had predicted. And in the shadows, Darth Sidious realized his window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Time for desperate measures. Time to truly test whether Anakin Skywalker could be turned, or whether the Emperor's training had made him genuinely incorruptible. Palpatine began to engineer his final gambit, a crisis that would target not Anakin directly, but the one vulnerability the Sith Lord had identified in all the boy's training. Padme. The Senate building's sub-level detention facilities were among the most secure locations on Coruscant, designed to hold beings accused of the most serious crimes against the Republic. Force-dampening fields, redundant security systems, guards selected for their incorruptibility and combat skills, all combined to make escape or rescue virtually impossible. It was here that Palpatine arranged for Padme Amidala to be brought, using fabricated evidence of treason so convincing that even her staunchest allies hesitated to defend her publicly. The charges were elaborate. Senator Amidala had allegedly been passing information to Separatist agents, using her position on key committees to undermine Republic military operations, and accepting bribes from corporations with Separatist sympathies. The evidence was falsified. Of course, Palpatine had spent decades mastering the creation of documentary trails that would withstand any conventional investigation, but it was convincing enough to justify her immediate arrest pending trial. Bail Organa protested vehemently in the Senate chamber, pointing out inconsistencies in the timing of the alleged contacts and questioning why someone as publicly anti-separatist as Padme would suddenly turn traitor. But Palpatine, maintaining his role as concerned chancellor rather than Sith manipulator, insisted that no one was above the law, that even senators must face justice when evidence of wrongdoing emerged. If Senator Amidala is innocent, he stated with carefully crafted regret, then the investigation will clear her name and she will be released with the Republic's sincere apologies. But until that investigation is complete, she must be held in secure custody to prevent any flight risk or evidence tampering. I take no pleasure in this, but justice demands equal treatment regardless of status. The vote was close, but ultimately went in Palpatine's favor. Padme was remanded to the secure detention facility. Her access to outside communication severely limited, her every movement monitored, but the imprisonment itself was only the first part of Palpatine's plan. The true manipulation came next. Using Sith techniques refined over decades of practice, Sidious sent Anakin a vision not while he slept, which would be too easily identified as external manipulation, but during a moment of waking vulnerability during training. The vision appeared as a flash of prescience, a glimpse of possible futures that Force-sensitive beings sometimes experienced spontaneously. In the vision, Anakin saw Padme dying in the detention facility, not from obvious violence that would indicate assassination, but from complications during childbirth. Childbirth that happened prematurely because of the stress and poor conditions of her imprisonment. He saw her calling his name, reaching out for help that never came, dying while giving birth to twins who would never know their mother. The vision was brief, but visceral, carrying the emotional weight of genuine prescience. And critically, it contained a timestamp, 3 days from now. The implication was clear: if Anakin didn't act within that time frame, didn't somehow secure Padme's release or move her to proper medical facilities, she would die exactly as shown. Anakin stumbled, his training momentarily disrupted by the shock and horror of what he had just witnessed. The Emperor, who had been observing the session, immediately sensed the change in his student's emotional state. "What did you see?" he demanded, his psychic senses probing for the source of the vision. "Padme," Anakin gasped, his enhanced physiology doing nothing to prevent the fear that gripped him. "She's been arrested, falsely accused of treason, and she's going to die in 3 days, complications from early childbirth because of the stress." I saw it clearly. It was a vision, a real one, not just a nightmare. The Emperor's expression darkened. The vision was real, but its source was not the natural precognitive abilities of the Force. "Sidious sent it to you, planting the seed of desperation he hopes will lead you to make foolish choices. The arrest is likely real, he would have engineered that as the foundation for his manipulation. But the vision of her death is designed to force you into actions that would begin your fall to darkness." "I don't care if it's manipulation," Anakin shouted, his control slipping for the first time in months. "If there's even a chance it's real, I have to do something. I can't just stand here training while she's imprisoned, pregnant, in danger." "And what would you do? Storm the detention facility? Use force to liberate her? That would confirm the treason charges in the public's mind, would make you a criminal, would give Sidious exactly the crisis he needs to justify further emergency powers. Or perhaps you would go to Sidious directly, beg him for mercy, accept whatever bargain he offers in exchange for her safety. That path leads directly to your fall. Then what am I supposed to do?" Anakin's voice carried anguish, all his carefully constructed control crumbling in the face of threat to the person he loved most. "Just accept that she might die? Let it happen because intervening would be falling to darkness? That's not purpose, that's cowardice." The Emperor was silent for a long moment, his ancient eyes studying Anakin with an intensity that pierced beyond surface emotion to examine the fundamental structure of his student's psyche. This was the true test, the moment he had been preparing Anakin for throughout the entire training process. "Listen to me very carefully," the Emperor finally said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Everything you are feeling right now, the fear, the desperation, the willingness to do anything to save her is natural and human. Your love for Padme is not weakness. Your desire to protect her is not wrong. But how you act on those feelings will determine whether you remain who you are or become what Sidious wants you to be." "I'm listening," Anakin managed, forcing himself to focus despite the panic threatening to overwhelm him. "First, We will secure her release through legitimate channels. Bail Organa is already working to expose the false evidence. I will add my influence, making it clear to the Senate that this is Sith manipulation. Padme will be freed, likely within 2 days, rendering the Vision's 3-day timeline irrelevant. Second, we will ensure she has access to the best medical care available, eliminating the risk of complications during pregnancy. Third, and most importantly, you will not confront Sidious directly about this. That is what he wants for you to come to him in desperation, to accept whatever bargain he offers. But what if the legal approach doesn't work fast enough? What if she actually is in danger before we can free her? Then, I will extract her myself, using methods that will not implicate you or confirm the false charges. You will not be involved. You will not compromise yourself. That is my promise to you, Anakin. I will not let Padme die. But you must trust me and not act rashly out of fear. It was perhaps the hardest thing Anakin had ever done, accepting that someone else would handle the threat to Padme rather than charging forward himself to save her. Every instinct screamed at him to take action immediately, to not wait for others to resolve a crisis he felt responsible for preventing. But he forced himself to remember the Emperor's teachings about purpose over emotion, about discipline in the face of fear, about trusting in something greater than his own desperate impulses. If he acted now, in panic and fear, he would be giving Sidious exactly what the Sith Lord wanted. I trust you, Anakin said finally, though his voice shook with the effort of restraint. Do what you need to do, but please, don't let her die. I will not, the Emperor promised. Now, continue your training. Channel your fear into focus. Use this test to demonstrate that you have truly internalized what I have taught you. The following 2 days were among the longest of Anakin's life. He threw himself into training with almost manic intensity, using physical exertion to distract himself from worries about Padme's condition. He practiced force techniques until exhaustion forced him to rest. He meditated using the mental disciplines the Emperor had taught him, building walls around his fear so it couldn't consume his judgment. And he waited, trusting that the Emperor would keep his word. Meanwhile, the Emperor worked on multiple fronts simultaneously. He contacted Bail Organa directly, providing him with evidence of the falsified documentation that even Palpatine's careful forgeries couldn't withstand under close examination. He appeared before the Senate, his presence alone enough to shift the political winds, and stated flatly that Senator Amidala was the victim of Sith manipulation designed to create chaos. You have a traitor in your government, he told the assembled senators, his voice carrying across the chamber with weight that could not be ignored. Not Padme Amidala, who has served the Republic faithfully for years. The true traitor is the one who engineered these charges, who benefits from your distraction with internal investigations while external threats gather. I have told you before that Palpatine is Darth Sidious. This is further proof of his manipulations. Release Senator Amidala immediately and direct your investigative resources toward the actual threat. Palpatine, forced to maintain his Chancellor persona, could only acquiesce with carefully simulated reluctance. If the Emperor provides evidence that the charges are false, then of course we must release Senator Amidala and apologize for this terrible mistake. However, I must strenuously object to the continued accusations against my person. I am not a Sith Lord, and these baseless claims do nothing but undermine confidence in the Republic's leadership during a time of crisis. The vote to release Padme was overwhelming once the evidence of falsification was presented. She was freed from detention after less than 2 full days of imprisonment, shaken by the experience but unharmed. Medical scans confirmed she was indeed pregnant with twins, but there were no complications and no indication that premature birth was imminent. The vision Sidious had sent Anakin showing her death in 3 days had been entirely false, a manipulation designed to create urgency and desperation. When Anakin was finally allowed to see her at the Emperor's facility, away from the public scrutiny that would have compromised their secret marriage, he held her with an intensity that spoke of barely controlled fear finally released. I thought I was going to lose you, he whispered. The vision was so clear, so real. But you didn't act rashly, Padme replied, understanding what he wasn't quite saying. You trusted in the process, in your teacher. in something beyond your own desperate need to save me. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than the physical modifications, harder than fighting Dooku. Just waiting, trusting, not charging forward to save you myself. That's growth, the Emperor observed, from where he had been standing at a respectful distance. That is what separates a gray knight from someone who would fall to darkness to save what they love. You felt the fear, acknowledged it, but did not let it control your actions. You maintained purpose, despite personal desperation. This is what I have been training you toward. Not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. Did you know? Anakin asked, pulling back slightly to look at the Emperor. Did you know Sidious was going to do this? I suspected he would attempt something targeting Padme. Yes, she is your obvious vulnerability, the attachment he believes he can exploit. This was a test, Anakin, though not one I engineered. Sidious tested whether you would fall when faced with threat to your love. You passed that test. But he will try again, with different methods, until he is finally convinced that you truly are incorruptible. Be ready. The incident had consequences beyond just Anakin's personal trial. The Senate, seeing more evidence of manipulation and the Emperor's successful intervention, began to shift their positions regarding centralized authority. If Palpatine couldn't be trusted, and the evidence that he was at minimum untrustworthy if not actually a Sith Lord was mounting, then perhaps the Republic needed a different structure of leadership. A coalition formed around Bail Organa and other reform-minded senators, proposing the creation of a transitional government that would investigate corruption, root out separatist sympathizers and Sith influence, and eventually establish a more robust system of governance. The Emperor was offered a formal role in this transition not as absolute ruler, which he had no interest in claiming, but as chief military advisor with broad authority over defense matters. Your republic is dying, the Emperor told the reformist senators during a private meeting. Its death began long before the Clone Wars, before Palpatine's manipulations, before the Sith's return. You created a system so bloated and corrupt that a single determined enemy could subvert it from within. No amount of reform will save the old republic. But you can build something new from its ashes, something stronger, more efficient, better prepared for the threats that exist beyond your borders. You speak of threats beyond the separatists and the Sith, Bail noted. You've mentioned an invasion before. Are you prepared to share details? I am, because you need to understand that everything the Clone Wars, Palpatine's schemes, your internal political struggles are insignificant compared to what approaches. In approximately 8 to 10 years, an extragalactic invasion force will arrive at this galaxy's edge. They are called the Yuuzhan Vong, and they represent an extinction-level threat to all life in this galaxy. The Emperor proceeded to share what he knew. The Yuuzhan Vong's organic technology, their invisibility to the Force, their religious fanaticism that viewed all mechanical technology as heresy, their proven track record of conquering and terraforming entire galaxies. He provided tactical assessments, strategic recommendations, and technological suggestions for weapons that might prove effective against bioorganic threats. The senators listened with growing horror as the scope of the threat became clear. If the Emperor's information was accurate, and they had no reason to doubt him at this point, then they were facing a threat that would make the Clone Wars seem like a minor border skirmish by comparison. We need to prepare immediately, Mon Mothma said, her political instincts recognizing that this external threat could serve to unify the fractured Republic. If the Separatists understood what was coming, perhaps they could be convinced to rejoin the Republic rather than fragmenting us at the moment we most need unity. An optimistic assessment, the Emperor replied, but worth attempting. I will provide evidence of the Yuuzhan Vong's approach to both Republic and Separatist leadership. If they have any sense of self-preservation, they will recognize that their current conflict serves only to weaken both sides against a greater enemy. This became the new focus of Republic diplomacy, using the external threat to force reconciliation with the Separatists. It was not an easy process. Decades of mistrust and recent years of open warfare had created deep wounds. But slowly, painfully, systems that had seceded began to reconsider their position, not because they trusted the Republic's government, but because they recognized that humanity and other sentient species needed unity to survive what was coming. During this diplomatic process, Anakin continued his training. The incident with Padme's arrest had served as a crucial test, but the Emperor pushed him further still. He needed to ensure that his student could resist even more subtle forms of temptation than simple fear for a loved one's safety. Sidious will not give up, the Emperor explained during a meditation session. He has spent too long planning, invested too much in his schemes to simply accept that you are beyond his corruption. He will try different approaches, offers of power, promises of knowledge, opportunities to use dark side techniques for ostensibly good purposes. You must be ready to recognize and resist all of them. How many times will he try? Anakin asked, frustrated by the constant testing. Until he is dead. A Sith Lord of his caliber does not simply abandon a prize like you. In his mind, you are the ultimate weapon, the apprentice who would make him invincible. He will keep trying because the alternative accepting his failure is intolerable to his ego. Then maybe we should just face him directly. End this before he can try again. Not yet. You are strong, yes, but not yet ready to face Sidious at his full power. He has been studying the dark side for over a century. He has resources, techniques, and knowledge that you cannot match despite your training and enhancements. Give it time. Continue growing. When you finally face him, you will do so with overwhelming advantage rather than barely adequate preparation. Anakin accepted this reluctantly, understanding the wisdom even if he chafed at the delay. Patience had never been his strongest quality, but the Emperor's training had at least taught him to recognize when patience was the correct strategic choice rather than just frustrating inaction. Months continued to pass. The Clone Wars wound down as more separatist systems negotiated peace. The Republic reformed itself into what was being called the Galactic Alliance, a new structure that maintained democratic elements while also implementing the centralized military authority necessary to defend against external threats. Palpatine remained as Chancellor during the transition, but his authority was increasingly constrained by the new governmental structure and by the Emperor's presence as a counterbalance. Sidious recognized that his window for creating his empire through the Clone Wars had closed. The conflict was ending not with Republic victory that he could exploit, but with negotiated peace that left him without the crisis he needed. His carefully laid plans of 40 years were crumbling, but he was not finished. If he could not create an empire through the Clone Wars, perhaps he could seize power through a different crisis. And if he could not corrupt Anakin Skywalker gradually, perhaps he could force a confrontation where the choice was between falling to darkness or watching the galaxy burn. It was time to stop manipulating from the shadows and act directly. Darth Sidious began making preparations for his final gambit, a move so desperate and dangerous that it would either secure his victory or guarantee his destruction. He would trigger an artificial crisis so severe that even the Emperor would be forced to deal with it, creating an opportunity for Sidious to face Anakin directly without interference. And this time, the Sith Lord would not hold back. He would use every technique, every artifact, every ounce of dark side power he had accumulated over decades of study. If he could not corrupt Anakin, he would kill him. And then he would face the Emperor himself, gambling that his knowledge of this galaxy's force techniques might provide some advantage against the Golden Being's immense power. It was insane. It was desperate. It was the last throw of the dice by someone who had lost control of a game he had been manipulating for decades. But Darth Sidious had not survived this long without being willing to take incredible risks when circumstances demanded. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Sidious chose his battleground carefully. The ancient Sith temple buried beneath Coruscant's foundations, a place so steeped in dark side energy that it had corrupted the planet's very force signature for millennia. Here, surrounded by artifacts and the lingering essence of dead Sith Lords, he would have every possible advantage. He sent the challenge directly to Anakin through the Force, his message bypassing all conventional security. Come face me, Skywalker. Come to the place where the Sith began their dominion over this world. Face me alone, or I will unleash power that will kill millions across Coruscant's lower levels. You have 1 hour. It was crude, desperate, but effective. Anakin could not ignore a direct threat to millions of civilians, and Sidious knew the Emperor's warrior code would demand single combat be honored when explicitly challenged. The Emperor studied Anakin as his student received the message. This is the final test. He has abandoned subtlety for direct confrontation. If you face him and win, you prove your training complete. If you lose, I won't lose, Anakin interrupted, his voice carrying absolute conviction. Everything you've taught me, everything I've become, has been building toward this moment. I'm ready, then go. But remember, he will use every technique available to him. He will attempt to break your mental defenses, to corrupt your purpose, to turn your strength against you. Trust in your training. Trust in your purpose. And if he offers you power or knowledge in exchange for service, remember that such bargains are always traps. Anakin departed, his silver armor gleaming as he made his way to the coordinates Sidious had provided. The descent took him deep into Coruscant's foundations, through layers of city that predated the Republic itself, into darkness that had not seen light in centuries. The Sith Temple was a nightmare of architecture, all sharp angles and oppressive spaces designed to channel dark side energy. Statues of ancient Sith lords lined the walls, their stone faces seeming to watch with malevolent intelligence. The air itself felt wrong, thick with corruption that would have overwhelmed a normal Jedi. But Anakin was no normal Jedi. His mental defenses, forged through months of brutal training, held firm against the temple's passive corruption. He walked through halls that would have driven others mad and remained centered, focused, purposeful. He found Sidious waiting in the central chamber, standing before an altar covered in Sith holocrons. The Chancellor's disguise was completely gone. Yellow eyes blazed with dark-side power, his face twisted into its true corrupt form, his entire body radiating malevolence that made reality itself seem to darken around him. Anakin Skywalker, Sidious greeted, his voice echoing with unnatural harmonics. Or should I call you the Emperor's pet project? His attempt to create a warrior immune to corruption? How arrogant, to believe that anyone can truly resist the dark side's call when properly motivated. I'm not here to debate philosophy, Anakin replied, igniting his silver blade. You threatened civilians. You challenged me to single combat. I accept. Surrender now, or face the consequences. Surrender? Sidious laughed, the sound scraping against Anakin's enhanced hearing like claws on metal. I am Darth Sidious, heir to Darth Bane's legacy, master of the grand plan that has guided the Sith for 1,000 years. I have spent a century preparing for dominion over this galaxy. And you, child, think you can simply defeat me because some golden stranger gave you enhanced muscles and pretty armor. The Emperor gave me more than physical enhancements. He gave me purpose beyond myself, discipline to channel power without corruption, and the knowledge that beings like you must be stopped regardless of cost. That's why I'll win, Sidious. Not because I'm stronger, but because I serve something greater than my own ambitions. Then let us test that theory. The battle began with Sidious unleashing force lightning of unprecedented intensity, drawing not just on his own power but on the dark side energy saturating the temple itself. Blue-white energy filled the chamber, arcing toward Anakin with enough force to carbonize flesh and shatter bone. Anakin raised both hands, channeling force judgment to counter the attack. Golden lightning met blue-white in a spectacular display that sent shockwaves through the temple, where the energies collided. The very air ionized, creating a barrier of pure power between the combatants. They held that clash for long seconds, each pouring more power into their respective attacks. The floor beneath them cracked. The walls developed fissures. Several of the Sith statues exploded into fragments from the ambient energy. Then Anakin pushed forward, his enhanced physiology allowing him to channel more power than any normal Force user could sustain. The golden lightning overwhelmed the blue-white, forcing Sidious to abandon his attack and dodge. Impressive, Sidious acknowledged, his voice carrying grudging respect. The Emperor taught you well. But power alone is insufficient against a master of Sith combat. He drew his lightsaber's twin crimson blades that ignited with a snap hiss and attacked with Form 7 Juyo, the most aggressive and unpredictable of lightsaber forms. His blades moved in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully calculated to exploit any opening, to create fear and uncertainty in opponents. Anakin met the assault with his hybrid style, incorporating elements from multiple forms while adding techniques the Emperor had taught him. Their blades met in cascades of sparks, moving so fast that only force-enhanced perception could track individual strikes. They fought across the chamber, neither gaining clear advantage. Sidious had a century of experience, having mastered every aspect of lightsaber combat known to the Sith. But Anakin had youth, enhanced physiology, and training that incorporated techniques from outside this galaxy entirely. "You're holding back," Sidious observed during a momentary disengagement. "You have power, but you don't use it fully. Why? Fear of falling to darkness if you truly cut loose?" "I use exactly as much power as necessary," Anakin replied. "Unlike you, I don't need to dominate for domination's sake. I need only to stop you." "How very Jedi of you. Let me show you what happens when power is truly unleashed without restraint." Sidious drew on the Sith holocrons surrounding them, channeling the accumulated knowledge and dark side energy of dead Sith lords into himself. His power multiplied, his form seeming to blur and multiply as dark side energy distorted reality around him. When he attacked again, it was with speed and ferocity beyond anything Anakin had yet faced. The Sith Lord seemed to be everywhere at once, his blades striking from impossible angles. His force powers creating hazards throughout the chamber hurled debris, collapsing sections of floor, even summoned darkness that tried to blind and disorient. Anakin found himself driven back, forced fully onto the defensive for the first time. Sidious was not merely skilled, he was channeling the combined techniques of dozens of ancient Sith, their knowledge flowing through him from the holocrons. But the Emperor had prepared Anakin for exactly this scenario. During training, he had simulated fighting multiple opponents simultaneously, had taught Anakin to perceive patterns in chaos, to find the thread of intention behind complex attacks. Anakin stopped trying to track every individual strike. Instead, he extended his force senses, feeling for Sidious's intent behind the flurry of attacks, and there he perceived it, the pattern. The repeated sequence that Sidious returned to unconsciously between his more creative combinations. When Sidious committed to that pattern again, Anakin was ready. He sidestepped the expected angle of attack and drove his silver blade forward, piercing through Sidious's defense to score a deep cut across the Sith Lord's ribs. Sidious screamed not just from pain, but from shock. The wound from Anakin's force-enhanced blade didn't just cut flesh. It burned at the dark side corruption that had sustained him for decades, purifying tissue at the cellular level. "Impossible," Sidious gasped, staggering backward. "That blade, what have you done to it?" "The Emperor taught me to channel force judgment through my weapon," Anakin explained, pressing his advantage. "Every strike doesn't just wound, it purifies. Your dark side corruption is being burned away with each cut. You can't regenerate using Sith techniques because there's nothing left to draw upon in the wounded areas." Sidious's eyes widened with genuine fear for the first time in decades. He had faced death before, had even come close to defeat on rare occasions. But he had always had options, always had techniques to escape or regenerate. This was different. This was true mortality staring him in the face. In that moment of fear, Sidious made his final desperate play. He reached for the darkest Sith technique he knew, essence transfer. He would abandon his failing wounded body and possess Anakin's enhanced form, taking all that power for himself. His consciousness surged out, attempting to invade Anakin's mind with the force of a century's accumulated will and dark side mastery. It was the same technique he had attempted before, but this time he held nothing back, committing his entire being to the assault. For an instant, Anakin felt the pressure Sidious's consciousness pressing against his own, trying to overwhelm his identity and claim his body. It was immense, terrible. The concentrated malevolence of a being who had spent a lifetime studying the dark side's darkest secrets. But the Emperor had prepared him for this too. Anakin's mental fortifications, built through months of intensive training, reinforced by absolute purpose, held firm. He recited the litanies that Grey Knights used against demonic possession, used techniques for separating self from external influence. And then he did something Sidious didn't expect. He counterattacked. Using techniques the Emperor had taught him, Anakin didn't just defend against the essence transfer, he reversed it. his own consciousness following Sidious's invading presence back to its source. Sidious found himself suddenly vulnerable in ways he had never experienced. Anakin's presence in his mind was like purifying fire, burning through memories of atrocities, forcing the Sith Lord to experience every evil he had committed from his victims' perspectives. Every manipulation, every murder, every act of cruelty, all laid bare and judged. "No," Sidious screamed, trying desperately to expel Anakin's presence. "Get out of my mind." "You opened this door," Anakin replied, his voice echoing in both the physical chamber and the mental battleground. "You thought you could take my body. Instead, I'm showing you what the Emperor showed me, that power without purpose is just cruelty. That domination without meaning is just emptiness. You spent a century becoming the strongest Sith Lord in history. And what did it gain you? Nothing but isolation, fear, and hatred. Even your victory would have been hollow." With a final surge of Force judgment channeled directly into Sidious's psyche, Anakin severed the Sith Lord's essence transfer attempt and drove him back into his own wounded body. Sidious collapsed, his physical form smoking where Anakin's blade had cut him, his mental defenses shattered by the psychic counter-assault. He looked up at Anakin, now standing over him with silver blade raised, and recognized true defeat. "Do it then," Sidious rasped. "Strike me down. Prove your Emperor right about purpose over power." Anakin looked down at the broken Sith Lord and felt no satisfaction, no triumph, no hatred. Just acknowledgement that this was necessary, that some threats could not be redeemed or imprisoned, only ended. "I don't do this because I hate you, Sidious. I don't even do it for revenge for all the people you've hurt. I do it because the galaxy needs to move forward, and you represent everything that holds it back. Your death serves the living. That's purpose enough." The silver blade descended, channeling Force judgment in its final strike. Darth Sidious died, his body consumed by purifying energy that burned away not just his physical form but his spirit, his connection to the Force, even his echoes in the dark side. The Emperor's promise was fulfilled. Sidious was erased so completely that the Force itself would struggle to remember he had existed. The Sith holocrons around the altar cracked and shattered, their stored knowledge rendered inaccessible with the death of the last true Sith Lord. The temple itself seemed to sigh, its dark side energy dissipating without Sidious's presence to maintain it. Anakin stood alone in the chamber, surrounded by the wreckage of his battle, and felt the weight of what he had accomplished. The Sith were ended. Palpatine's schemes were finished. The threat that had hung over the galaxy for decades was eliminated. He had passed the final test. He was truly a Grey Knight, incorruptible, purposeful, capable of wielding immense power without being consumed by it. The Emperor was waiting when Anakin emerged from the temple depths. One look at his student's face told him everything he needed to know. "It is done," the Emperor stated. Not a question, but acknowledgement. "It's done," Anakin confirmed. "Sidious is dead, destroyed so completely that even his spirit couldn't escape. The Sith are ended." "Well done, Anakin Skywalker. You have proven everything I believed you could become. You faced ultimate temptation and ultimate power, and remained true to your purpose. That is the mark of a true Grey Knight." In the months following Sidious's death, the galaxy transformed rapidly. With the Sith threat eliminated and the Clone Wars ended, the new Galactic Alliance moved forward with remarkable unity. Systems that had been separatist rejoined, recognizing that their grievances had been largely manufactured by Sith manipulation. The military was reorganized under Alliance authority, with the Emperor serving as supreme commander of defensive forces, and preparations began in earnest for the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. The Emperor personally oversaw the construction of fortress worlds along the galactic rim, massive defensive installations designed specifically to counter bioorganic technology. Chemical weapons were developed that would devastate living tissue. Thermal weapons were scaled up to create firestorms that could sterilize entire battlefields. The Space Marine program accelerated, with thousands of volunteers undergoing the transformation that would make them transhuman warriors. Anakin, now recognized as the Emperor's champion and the first Grey Knight of this galaxy, led the training programs. He shared everything the Emperor had taught him, forging a new generation of warriors who could use all aspects of the Force without corruption. The Jedi Order reformed itself as well, acknowledging that the Emperor's criticisms had been valid. They became the Crusader Order's warriors, dedicated to protecting the innocent against darkness, but no longer constrained by dogma that prevented them from using their full power. 8 years after the Emperor's arrival, the Yuuzhan Vong vanguard emerged from dark space at the galaxy's edge. They came with world ships and bioweapons, expecting to find a divided civilization unprepared for their assault. Instead, they found fortress worlds bristling with weapons designed specifically to kill them. They found space marines who could match their warriors in close combat. They found a united galaxy ready and waiting. The Battle of the Rim lasted 6 months, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. The Yuuzhan Vong vanguard was systematically destroyed, their world ships burned, their invasion broken before it could properly begin. When survivors retreated to report to their main fleet, they carried a message from the Emperor himself, transmitted psychically across light years. This galaxy is defended. Tell your leaders that if they value their civilization's survival, they will not return. We are ready for you. We will always be ready. The main Yuuzhan Vong fleet, receiving reports of unprecedented losses against prepared defenses, made the strategic decision to bypass this galaxy entirely. There were other targets, other civilizations less capable of resistance. The invasion was averted through preparation rather than desperate last stands. In the decades that followed, the Galactic Alliance prospered under the Emperor's guidance. Anakin served as Lord Commander of the military forces, leading humanity's expansion and defense. Padme, cleared of all charges and restored to political prominence, worked to ensure that the new government maintained democratic principles even as it accepted the necessity of centralized military authority. Luke and Leia Skywalker grew up in a galaxy at peace, trained from childhood in their father's techniques as potential future Grey Knights. The Emperor, watching them develop, saw the possibility of a new generation that could carry forward what he had built here. And occasionally, late at night when he stood alone looking at the stars, the God Emperor of mankind wondered about the Imperium he had left behind in his original galaxy. Had they survived his departure? Had they fallen to civil war or chaos corruption? He would never know. But he had built something worthwhile here. A galaxy united, prepared, strong. A warrior in Anakin who embodied the best possibilities of humanity. A future that held hope rather than merely survival. For a being who had spent 40,000 years fighting in darkness, that was victory enough. The age of the Republic had ended. The age of the Sith had ended. The age of the Galactic Alliance had begun, with humanity and other species standing together against any threat that might emerge from the dark. And at its heart stood 2 figures, the Golden Emperor who had crossed realities to save a civilization, and the Silver Grey Knight who had proven that power could be wielded without corruption. The grim darkness of the far future had been averted in this galaxy, replaced by purpose, unity, and strength tempered by wisdom. The stars waited, and humanity was ready. The end.